Hi there, welcome to Mark Bajerski YouTube channel. Welcome to the Pure Energy Healing Academy. Today I'd like to introduce myself to you if you haven't seen or watched any of these videos before, listened to any of the podcasts that I've done, but my name is Mark Bajerski, and for 2 decades I've been what is named or called a modern day Ghostbuster. What is that? Is that filled with ego or what? It's kind of really the only thing you can call it. A Ghostbuster, meaning that I go into properties and try and clear the energy of that ghost in there. So I made a video this morning and I mentioned the Joe Rogan experience. And this is a podcast which is filmed, I believe, in America, California. And on this particular podcast, which was sent to me a few days ago, and so many people have asked me about it now that I'm doing a follow-up. And I only kind of briefly mentioned it, but I didn't watch it all. I only watched it to the point where I didn't know how far it went on, but it went to the stage where they all got into the car, these 4 or 5 guys or girls got into a car, and then they started explaining why the ghost said that there was no such thing as heaven, and it was based upon a religious belief. And 1 or 2 of them who were religious said that in their religious understanding that anybody who denies heaven is from hell, evil. So I think that's the part where I had to switch it off. I couldn't cope with it anymore. I was freaked out, and I was like, I can't believe that somebody in such a high profile would bring on young boys with no understanding whatsoever and make a story of something that they just don't know what they're talking about. And it was like, to me, I always thought he was kind of sensible and brought right people on who understood what they were talking about. So I switched it off because I freaked out, because that's my field of work. And it was like, if it was your field of work and you were listening to somebody who's never done your field of work talking on a humongous platform, you would probably feel the same as me, because what I felt for that, and it isn't like, oh, I'm jealous, I want to go on his show, because I don't want to go on his show. I'm no interest in going on his show. But putting that out there into the ether amongst so many people, the only thing that I was so upset about was this could have gone somewhere very beautiful. It could have been taken to a place where many things could have been explained and many things could have been shared to change people's outlook on the idea of what's called ghosts. So I guess today this is a video about Joe Rogan experience and my interpretation of what was said, and how I can actually explain to you what happened in, I believe, a ship with a few people who were trying to communicate with spirit. First of all, I've been in many situations where it's been a dark room, all the lights are out, and it's been a place which you would believe is haunted. Now, the word haunted should be taken and binned, because there's no such thing as the word haunted. That's just something that's been, it's like a Hollywood way of dramatizing things, okay? That's how they sell movies, that's how they sell books, and so on. Just like the word Ghostbuster. Again, all hyped up words. So, if that question was asked to me, what do you think happened and what was going on? This is how I would interpret it and explain thoroughly. Well, thank you for inviting me on. This is what I feel over the years that I've worked with spirit. Inside any given property, as well as outside any given property, you can have pockets of what's called energies, and those energies vibrate at a completely different frequency than you and I, than an empty room. And those frequencies, those energies vibrate at sometimes very light energies, very healing energies. And that's normally spirit from our home world. Let's say home. Let's not call it heaven. Let's call it home. And actually, on a side note, there is no such thing as hell or heaven. Okay, so you've got the home world where we come from, and that is basically all around us on a different frequency. So if you imagine that you're sat in a room and there's a box in front of you and you want to listen to Radio 1, you'll turn the dial till you hit Radio 1. Okay? And then if you keep turning the dial, Radio 1 disappears and then Radio 2 comes on because you've hit a different frequency. That is exactly the frequencies that I'm talking about, but not on radio waves. I'm talking about frequency, vibration, that everything is energy. So you've got this very high frequency energy, which is very healing, very peaceful, and it really makes the room phenomenal. It vibrates at such a beautiful and clarity energy, it's unreal. And then you've got another energy, which is the energy which is in the ship. And that is a frequency which is dense and heavy. So what does that mean? Why is it dense and heavy when we talk about ghosts? Well, the interesting thing about when we transition from this body, this spacesuit, and our consciousness leaves this spacesuit, whether it leaves this spacesuit and goes into the frequency of Radio 1, say, or frequency of Radio 2, which is Radio 1 is the high frequency where home is, or 2 is a different place. And that different place normally happens because there is some kind of shock energy. There is some kind of disaster. There is some kind of bad thing that happened in that energy area. How far does that energy go? To my understanding, it can go at least 50 meters, 100 meters. And that energy can be quite wide. And there isn't a center point where you say, okay, that person died here, or that person was abused and killed here, or hung here, or accidentally tripped and fell and banged their head. That energy is all over. So it's created an energy. At that point of impact of when we should have moved into the light, we don't. We go to Radio 2. Radio 2 is a place what is not our home and not this world. So the spacesuit is gone, but the consciousness is in between, which I call, it's the only way I can explain, is trapped in between our home, which vibrates at light, and this world, which vibrates at this kind of level inside here where you reside. You are this hosting kind of thing. So it's fascinating. So what these young men and women on the Joe Rogan Experience were talking about was a spirit which was trapped in between two worlds. Now, there could have been one, more than one. Often there's more than one in areas of issues and problems. So I'll give you a great, for instance, I was in Bali, and there's one particular place in Bali which is one of the known ghost hotels in the world. And I couldn't wait to go in. Why? Because I understand what spirit trapped in between two worlds is and how we can help. Now, if you've ever watched Beetlejuice, I think it was that, or even Ghost. When you are trapped in between the two, you have an energy that is different from all energy, and you can vibrate at unique frequencies depending on what or how you passed. So, for instance, if you were a nasty murderer and you didn't go into the light, you didn't go home, something happened that you basically your spirit stayed in between worlds, there is the same frequency of memory and anger within this consciousness that does not feel the same consciousness as the spirit world. So this is called spirit in denial. So spirit in denial can be aggressive, argumentative. They can mess about with your mind, mess about with your life. It can ruin your life. It can persuade you to hate somebody in that room or to drift you apart from somebody. It can make you angry or violent. It can make you want to drink more alcohol and so on, because they attach themselves or they enter into your frequency that then manipulates your frequency if you're not strong enough. So if you're in a bad place, you're not feeling good, it's easier for spirit trapped in between two worlds which are in denial that can do this. But they also have a frequency that can make things happen. So they can take, for instance, in many houses, while I was working, the taps would come on. So water would start coming out of a tap. The biggest thing that I found for me was breaking of mirrors. Mirrors always tended to break, crack. So they have the frequency that can actually break things. And that's kind of dangerous if they fall. Then you've got the other side of it, which is the frequency of manipulating energy of the computer. That it can mess with radio. It also has an energy that can give off, which can smell as well sometimes. So you can smell cigars or smell weird smells, and so on. So where I'm going with this particular point where the boys ran out because their religion gave them a doctrine. So they believe what they were told. And that is, if a spirit is telling you there's no such thing as heaven, I'll explain why it did that. When spirit's trapped in between two worlds, it's neither of this world or our home world. So when we were in this world, we don't know whether there is a heaven, right? We don't know that. We can believe it as faith, and we can believe it in our heart, but we don't really know. There's no photos, evidence, or no videos shown. So it's whether you believe it or not, okay? So that same energy, that same thought, that same memory resides within the spirit in the room that has passed. So they don't know. And depending on what their belief system was, they still carry that memory because they haven't gone into the light yet. Because when you go into the light, everything is revealed. You understand everything. Everything is shown in front of you. And then you move into the light, or you then vibrate into the frequency of this Radio 1. Okay? So they're asking spirit trapped in between two worlds questions that all they know as spirit in denial, what they experienced when they were of this world. So it's very easy to answer questions and make noises, knock, bang, all sorts. That's easy for spirit trapped in between two worlds. They can do that, and they often do it. So when that's happening, they're giving you what they have the memory of. What they don't understand and what they don't know is when they're trapped in between two worlds and they're in denial, they have no concept of our home world or what you may consider as heaven or hell. They don't know. In fact, they still believe that they are part of this world. There is a type of confusion because you imagine that somebody comes into your energy frequency and walks around, and for them it's confusing, and sometimes they cause issue because they're confused. They're sometimes upset. What are you doing in my house? What are you doing here? So it's like that. When I've sat and meditated, I often get this noises, smells, things breaking. That's normal because we're in their home. And then when we start to communicate, or when I start to communicate and try to talk to them and explain to them just where you are right now. In fact, as I speak to you, if I was doing a session with you, talking to you about your life and what you're going through and all the pain and suffering that you've gone through and all the issues that you have with your family, I would speak to spirit in the same way. I would speak exactly like I'm speaking to you, but within my thoughts, because my thoughts are equal energy frequency to what spirit in denial can feel. So they can feel my thoughts. They know what I'm saying, and they can obviously put thoughts into me as well. That's what I worked upon. That's how I work. No words were needed. So as I'm speaking to spirit, especially if we're talking about the Joe Rogan experience, their experience with this person who said there's no heaven, I would begin a conversation with them and then start to become, let's say, friendly, like talk to them, reassure them, and then slowly start to explain that where they are right now is not exactly where they're meant to be, and where they should be is in another place, because where they are is not home. So I gently try and explain to, whether it's a child that something's happened to them, whether it's an adult who's done terrible things, I try and not think about that, but try and help them so that they vibrate out of that frequency into the frequency of Radio 1 and that beautiful energy where we should be. And that is how it works. So a spirit in denial does not have great information. In fact, if anything, they're so limited, like a horse with blinkers, because all they know is where they are and what they're doing. And they do have memory of their past life, which they think is their memory, is their understanding to life, which is very limited. And that's how it works. So if I was in that place, just like many other so-called healers, psychics, medium who have been on the TV, I've often said when I've met them, why didn't you ever help spirit back into the light? Because that was my job. And so it's frustrating when people do TV shows and yet they don't have somebody there to help that soul back into the light. Now, I'm not saying I fixed or helped all spirit back into the light. That would be a complete lie. But what I did do is, when I struggled to help spirit back into the light and they completely were in denial and refused, what I would do then is make a conscious decision. And that would be to sage the place. And most people don't know how to sage, and that's not their fault because they've just read from a book. But the sage smoke, there's something so special about the smoke. And if you can sage a room and another room and sage everywhere, so you've basically got fog from the sage in every room, every corner, you find that that spirit in denial disappears. And people have asked me, where's that spirit gone? And I've never been able to say 100% where have they gone. I like to believe that they've gone back home to the spirit world, because the dense energy that kept them in between has now cleared them. So it's like a jet wash of clearing away all of that denial, all of that energy that keeps you vibrating in between two worlds, so that you cross over the veil and go home. I can't be 100% sure about that, but I do know it's helped all my clients over these 2 decades. And there's never been a time after the first, I'd say 6 months, being honest, after the first 6 months, when I really understood how this worked and realized I was making mistakes because I was following books and listening to other people who've been in this work but not actually done it properly. So I was listening to the people thinking, no, I think there's something else. So through my own experience, I realized how to sage properly, which 95% of people, nearly 100% of people don't know how to. They just waft a little stick. That's not how it works. So by doing it properly, by speaking to spirit and trying to help them vibrate back into home frequency, you change the energy of the room. And that energy then, there is no ghosts. It's gone, because it wasn't a ghost. It was just spirit trapped in between two worlds. And therefore, I leave it at that. And that is, I mean, you could bang away like 1,000 questions at me and I'd be really happy to answer them all, because I understand, because I've worked in this field of work. But you really can bring two young men who have no idea of anything and start to have a dialogue of something that they have no idea of, especially when it's such a big conversation that can change the world and help the world. Because if the world listened to what I just said, they might find peace, and they might then go into, okay, this is interesting, and where do we go from here? What can we do to help? How can we do this? And then that brings on another subject that I would have talked about. So that's it. I hope I answered that for you. There's probably tons of things I haven't mentioned, but that is just a slice, just a fraction of what I've learned with spirit in between two worlds, or what other people call ghosts. I hope this helps. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.